I'll officially call to order the July 20th meeting of the City of Falls Church Planning Commission. Mr. Trainer was our welcome, first of all, our new staff liaison. We're glad to have you. I know you have a history with the city. I think you grew up in the city? So you've got a lot of history here. We're glad to have you with us. So first order of business, will you please call the roll?
There we go. Ms. Weiss?
Here.
Ms. Teets?
Here.
Mr. Stevens?
Here.
Mr. Krasner?
I'm here.
Mr. Puentes? Ms. Comont?
Here.
Mr. Hyra?
Okay, so we got the critical mass, and we will proceed. First order, if somebody who's on the Teams call can just mute themselves, wherever that may be. All right, good. Okay, first order of business then, number 3, to adopt our agenda. Pretty logical tonight. I did talk to Mr. Stoddard. We got one main item and a few other perfunctory things. So if there's no changes, I'll look for a motion to adopt the agenda as it was prepared.
I move to adopt the agenda.
Thank you. Mr. Stevens, we have a second?
Second.
We have a second by Ms. Weiss. Any discussion? If not, then we'll need a... Actually, can we do this by a voice vote? I think we can, since we're here in person.
Yep.
So all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, so the motion to proceed with the agenda, or the agenda is adopted, and we will proceed as published. Number 4 is our speaker series. We have no speakers tonight. That brings us to item 5, receipt of petitions for items which are not on our agenda. I know we have some correspondence that's related to, some of which is related to items on our agenda, but did we have anything not, any petitions, does Mr. Trainer have it, or Mr., who's handling that? Do we have any items?
Yeah, we have a Mr. Rothstein joining us, who wanted to speak.
And I believe that's on an item, that's on our agenda, right? So he's here to...
He submitted comment, but he's also on Teams wanting to speak as well.
And that's on item 6A.
Right, so if that's for an item on 6A, we'll wait to that item. That's a public hearing, and so there'll be an opportunity to participate. This is for anyone who's looking to bring up an item that's not on the agenda, and that item is on the agenda. So if that's what it's about, then we'll wait till we get officially to that portion of the agenda. Okay, so we'll then move forward, and that brings us to item 6, which is our action items. And we have one action item on our agenda for tonight. And I guess I'll read the title. This is a public hearing. So we are holding a public hearing on making a recommendation to City Council on, let me see if I can make sure I read this the right way. This is an ordinance to approve the acquisition of property owned by Virginia Tech, located in Fairfax County, tax map number, it's 40-3, 10092, to approve the conveyance of that property and the property owned by the City of Falls Church, commonly known as the Virginia Tech Northern Virginia Center, Fairfax County tax map 40-3, 2, lot 92A, to Converge West Falls LLC, and to approve the terms set forth in the purchase agreements. So that is our item, and I believe we have Mr. Shields here from staff to present that. Again, we're here in our capacity as the Planning Commission, who the city charter has us charged with making recommendations to the council on any purchase or disposition of city property, and that is what this item is about. So I guess with that, I know Mr. Fuller has an introduction.
Yes, I will introduce the item, thank you. And as you said, Wyatt Shields, city manager, is here to present this item. And we also have a PowerPoint that we'll have ready for that as well. So the council at its July 11th meeting formally referred TO 22-33, the ordinance, to the commission for action. So we've got a public hearing tonight. The planning commission is requested to make a final recommendation on this, as they will be taking this item up at the end of the month on the 25th of July. The purchase and sale of these real properties is summarized in the staff report. There's also purchase and sale agreements that were attached for your review. There's also, with the council staff report, there was a detailed background and history of the properties, the ownership, the interest. The planning commission had received a preliminary briefing on this previously, and then the main staff analysis was focused on the comprehensive plan and the area plans and the application to these properties, which are some owned by the city and others owned by Virginia Tech, and then we have a third party that we're conveying to. So it's a purchase of a single parcel from Virginia Tech under their ownership. Then there's a second parcel the city currently owns. The city would buy the parcel from Virginia Tech and then sell the two parcels, their parcel and the one they just purchased from Virginia Tech, to a third party. And there's, purchase agreements that outline that. And so the Convergence West Falls LLC would be the recipient of those properties. In looking at the comprehensive plan in 2018, we did a major update to the comprehensive plan and the future land use map, and that better aligned the city's vision for this end of the city, the west end, and the type and scale of development that we were anticipating on the schools-related parcels planning opportunity area. And the designations were specifically, the POA was a special revitalization district for education and economic development, and then the special revitalization district was proposed to be developed with educational uses and a mix of commercial and residential uses. And so in delivering on that vision, the new Meridian High School was constructed, and then construction has broken ground on approximately 9.5 acre economic development site. The small area plan goals outline the special revitalization district and are supported by a number of strategies and objectives that are listed on page 3.2 and 3, and these were a part of the attachments you received this evening. So with that, I'm going to turn this over to the city manager for his presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Fuller. Chairman Krasner, members of the Planning Commission, it's good to be with you here tonight. Mr. Trainer's got a few slides up. This is really the same slide deck that we used with the City Council last week. And this is largely just for general background information and for anybody who's watching, just to understand exactly what it is that's being proposed. So next slide. Mr. Fuller gave a good description of it, but a map is always helpful. And so what we're looking at is a aerial view of the new Meridian High School, and then the former high school in this picture shown as having been demolished. We have Broad Street kind of on the lower left-hand side, and then Haycock running up along kind of the right-hand side of the frame. So the Northern Virginia Center is comprised of two real estate parcels. Parcel 1 is owned by the City of Falls Church. That's 5.3 acres and has been leased to Virginia Tech since 1995 under a 40-year ground lease. Parcel 2 is owned fee simple by Virginia Tech. That's 2.0 acres. And so the total site that would be conveyed ultimately to Converge LLC is 7.4 acres. As Mr. Fuller noted, Parcel 2 will convey to the city, but in essentially a simultaneous transaction, then the full land would then go to Converge LLC. Next slide. Just a little bit of background on the 1995 ground lease. So that it applies only to parcel 1, as I noted before. The city is the landlord and owner of that land. The tenant was originally UVA and Virginia Tech. Virginia Tech bought out UVA's interest in 2018. The term of the ground lease does expire in 2035. Next slide. So one of the provisions in the ground lease is that the universities, and now just Virginia Tech, beginning last year, has an option to purchase. And so they really actually do have, for all practical purposes, control of the land. That purchase price is $2.85 million, which is $3.35 minus the $500,000 deposit that they paid back in 1995. So the net today would be $2.85 million. There are use restrictions on the property. So part of this sale does lift those use restrictions, and that's an important thing to know and understand. Section 303 does contemplate a sale to a third party and lays out some of the terms for that. We didn't follow that exactly. This is really kind of a de novo transaction. I will note that Virginia Tech has already, in 2021, formally put the city on notice of their intent to exercise the option. So this is, in many respects, a transaction in lieu of them just taking possession of the entire property for themselves. Next slide. So what is contemplated now with Converge West Falls LLC, and so that is a partnership really for the purpose of developing this property. Behind Converge is Rushmark Properties, and what their intention is to build a new corporate headquarters for HIT Contracting, and in addition to that, I'll talk a little bit about their program, I guess, on the next slide. The purchase price for the full 7.41 acres is $25 million. Under negotiations with Virginia Tech, the city would get 1/3 of that, and Virginia Tech would get 2/3. Now, Virginia Tech has already paid UVA essentially 1/3. So the effect of this arrangement is following basically the spirit of Section 3.03 of the original ground lease. There would be contemplated one closing for all transactions, and so these transfers would all essentially occur on the same day, effectively simultaneously. Next slide. So from a planning perspective, we'll go through just at a very high level what's proposed, and the city's role in the land use process will be as an adjacent locality. So similar to when we were developing our 10-acre site, we invited Fairfax County to comment on it, but the authority lay with the city. And similarly, all the land use approvals will go through Fairfax County. As an adjacent locality, we'll have an opportunity to comment on that. Prior to them submitting their land use applications to Fairfax County, the city will have an opportunity to review those and either say that these are okay to submit or they're not okay to submit. What Rushmark has committed to is to work with us as they're developing their plans and not sort of spring these plans on us at the last second for us to say thumbs up or thumbs down, but to have discussion as they're going along. As the school board considered the earlier plans for the HIT Contracting headquarters, they did have some comments on the layout of the site and the impacts on Meridian High School, and I anticipate that we'll have the opportunity to have that comment period and ultimately a thumbs up or a thumbs down to make sure that, that the plans are harmonious with what we have next door. The plan is 240,000 square feet of office, and so that's the new corporate headquarters for HIT Contracting. Embedded in that is Virginia Tech's continuing role on the site, and that is the creation of a new national center for smart construction that Virginia Tech will host, and that will be a space for emerging technologies in the construction field. Also, a lot of contractors and people who are developing these emerging technologies, they would be working in that space and displaying their techniques and new technologies in that space. Also proposed is 440 apartments, and those would front on Haycock Road, ground floor retail on the apartment component, and the completion of West Falls Station Boulevard. And that has been a very important planning principle for both the city and Fairfax County. We do want that road to be built, and there's a schedule for that road to be built on the front end of this development as opposed to on the back end of that development. Next slide. So this is a little bit of a dated conceptual plan, and when I say dated, the city pieces of it are correct, and I think much of the West Falls Station areas are up to date, but the middle section will be modified somewhat under the revised plans. So the middle section is the Virginia Tech piece of it, which is closest to the football field. The apartments, I think, will be largely along this idea, maybe some changes to that as well, fronting on Haycock Road. The key thing, though, is that the West Falls, or a key thing from the city's perspective, is that West Falls Station Boulevard runs through the middle of the property. I do think that the city will also have additional interest in the frontage, the way that those buildings interact with Mustang Alley, and how the buildings interact with Meridian High School. Those will be among possibly other areas that we'll want to comment on and help shape as these plans are developed. Next slide. So this is the last slide of my presentation, and happy to answer any questions after this. So some of the key milestones, this is scheduled to go back before the City Council next Monday for their public hearing and final consideration. After we have signed the PSAs, if the council does grant its approval, and after Virginia Tech also goes through its process, they would then commence a feasibility period for Converge LLC to do environmental and other things. That's a 90-day period after execution of the PSAs. They are intending to submit land use applications in January of 2023, so about 5 months from now. And again, the city will see those plans beforehand and ultimately have thumbs up or thumbs down prior to those being submitted. March 2026 is the target date for the road, West Falls Station Boulevard, being open to the public. And so that is a summary of what's before the Planning Commission. Again, as was noted at the beginning, this is under the city's charter provisions that the sale or acquisition of real estate goes before the Planning Commission for your recommendation, and that is the request tonight. So I'll stop there and happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Shields. Appreciate that. And we did briefly talk about this in a work session, so this is back before us. I appreciate providing the documents. It's a complicated transaction. I guess these kind of things always are. But anyhow, do any of my fellow commissioners have some questions for Mr. Shields? Anyone have any questions on this? Mr. Stevens, you want to start us off? Go ahead.
I do, thank you. Yeah, this is a complicated transaction, but I think you explained it very well. Thank you for that. First question is a pretty long time frame before the closing. I think it's almost 3 years. If something were to fall through, is there any protection aspects for the city?
So the land doesn't convey. If it falls through, then what I anticipate is that the city and Virginia Tech will kind of be back to where we were prior to this proposal sort of being brought back to life. And Virginia Tech, I think, would seek to exercise its option to purchase. Kind of the key thing for the city will be the construction of the road. One thing we've not wanted is for the land to lay fallow. Just to be frank, when we started this planning process a long time ago, one of the first people we reached out to was Virginia Tech and UVA back in 2014, some of the first Urban Land Institute studies for this, to get them to think about what the potential is for their land. So we would be kind of back to square one if this does fall apart, but that is a possibility. I will say that Converge LLC's intention is to get land use approvals about a year prior than that outside closing date. So that's their schedule, but they can't control that. And so they have been given, I would say, about 12 months of additional grace period, probably more like 9 months ahead of more than their schedule for grace period. That's not something we're super comfortable with, I'll be frank with you, but that's the way we've ended those discussions.
So it doesn't sound like there's anything like a damage provision, but our protection, it sounds like, is just we retain ownership of the land and kind of take it from there.
That's right.
Okay. Will Virginia Tech continue any educational activities after this? I tried to read some of their press announcements on the National Center for Smart Construction, which doesn't sound like it's an academic-related function, but I was just curious if they can plan to continue, as far as you know, any academic activity after this project is finalized.
I think I need to let Virginia Tech answer that question. And you know, maybe 3 years ago, the idea was actually that one of the Virginia Tech schools would be co-located on the site and a full academic program. That is definitely not part of this proposal anymore. So this much more kind of narrowed down National Center for Smart Construction, which, as I understand, is going to be kind of focused on academic and corporate collaborations to bring things from the lab to the marketplace. But they're the ones who should speak to that.
Yeah. I thought it was interesting that, I don't know if it was just because Virginia Tech was prescient, but it was 2018, and the amount that they paid, $8 million, sounds like that's what each party is planning to get from this transaction here almost 5 years later. So I guess my interpretation of that is that this has kind of been in the thinking for quite a while, at least since 2018. Would that be correct, or am I reaching too far to reach that conclusion?
I can't really speak for Virginia Tech's thinking on this, and I'll just say that we did have a period of negotiation on all these matters. Virginia Tech did have very strong views on how this should proceed, and ultimately, the numbers in terms of how this is shaken out was the product of negotiation, but did follow pretty closely along with, I think, Virginia Tech's ideas.
Yeah. I did ask Paul Stoddard about the price, the $25 million total price, and whether or not that was a fair price in light of today's real estate market. He indicated at the time that he was going to check into that, but I was just wondering, from your perspective, from a staff's perspective, is that a fair price in today's marketplace for that parcel, for the 7 acres?
So the city has had a commercial real estate advisor on board for the past 4 years to advise us on the 10-acre site, and they provided advice through this transaction as well. We did not have an appraisal per se, but we did have a commercial real estate expert kind of at our side running numbers to give us a better insight in terms of market value and what the potential was. And ultimately, he gave a positive recommendation that this from the gross price perspective was reasonable in the market.
Okay, that's all I have. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Stevens. Anybody else? Ms. Weiss?
Yeah, I just wanted to follow up on Mr. Stevens' first question, just to, the difference between, or the time between purchase and sale agreements and closing. What happens at closing is that's when the land conveys. Is that correct?
That's right.
So what leverage do we have after the purchase and sale agreement is executed? Like, is there something that allows us, I'm just mindful that this is in Fairfax County, and once we sell the land legally, do we lose any kind of leverage about how the land is used beyond the good faith engagement with our neighbors? So is there some sort of protection built into the purchase and sale agreement that would allow us to pull the plug if we felt like that engagement wasn't going well?
So that's a very good question. So just in terms of the sequence of things, the purchase and sale agreements are first, then the land submittals go in, and then after land use approvals is when closing occurs. Virginia Tech plans to, under this schedule, would leave the site in December of 2024. So that's one other element of this, is they have programs that are going to be going in through that time frame. So there's that deadline plus the land use approval time, and they're kind of synced up essentially as, in terms of the amount of time that both need. We do, as I've noted, before they submit their land use applications, the city does have the veto authority there. Your question is, as it goes through the process, what if there are changes that we don't like? We do not, in the agreement, have formal authority on that. There's not like a process by which we would adjudicate those things, but ultimately, closing is contingent upon all the parties being willing to close at the end of the day. So there is kind of that ultimate last step that the city has. I think probably the most accurate statement, though, is that we will be relying on the good faith of the process. We did listen to Fairfax County as they went through, as we went through our process, and my expectation is that the county will be a good neighbor as they go through the land use process as well.
That's helpful. And we have veto until the land use application is submitted, is that?
Yeah, there's
What is
a,
that?
so in
How
the
does that work?
PSAs that are before you, there's a 10-day approval process. So that's why it's really important that we get advance viewing of those, and those have been committed that they will be provided. We have asked that timeline still be extended longer than the 10 days, and so that's still one kind of minor negotiation, but that time frame will be likely extended to be 3 weeks or 15 business days, a slightly longer period, just to make sure that nothing gets missed as we have that formal review period time.
So just so I understand, so we'll execute the purchase and sale agreement. Months later, we'll have extended time to review Fairfax County's land, or the land use application. Is there something in the purchase and sale agreement, other than extended time for us to review, that gives us any kind of leverage over what that land use application looks like beyond the extra time and just being good neighbors?
So in that pre-period, we have a lot of say. After we've given that approval and they've submitted it, it really will be primarily in Fairfax County's hands. So that's the way it's laid out. And I will state that, from a developer's perspective, having two localities with active ongoing commenting processes is chaotic, and it's very difficult for them to manage. So they've sought to sequence them. And Fairfax County does have the ultimate authority on land use, so they get that formal process. So we'll have a formal pre-approval, and then after that, we'll be relying on good faith.
Okay, that's helpful. And then the last question I had was, I guess maybe more for staff than anything. So if this is at the wrong time, just correct me. But I just wanted to confirm the Planning Commission's role, authority, criteria for decision-making. Is it reviewing against the comprehensive plan? I mean, I reviewed the charter, but I just want to make sure we're clear on what criteria we're using to make this decision and recommendation.
Yes, you're correct. It's 17.07 of the charter, as you referred to, and that's applying the comprehensive plan policies and strategies to any purchase or sale of land.
Thank you.
Just to if I could just follow up, just because you mentioned that, Ms. Weiss, for Mr. Shields. So, I mean, there is that provision, I guess, in 6C, which talks about a material modification to the application. So after the purchaser has filed the application with Fairfax, and they're in the process, if there's a material modification, and they to try to define what that might be, and it looks like we do get another 10 business days to review that change. And so, am I reading that right? Is that what that would allow?
Yeah, that is correct. I think there is another sort of element to that, a modification to the minimum site requirements, which are defined in the agreement as well.
It says minimum site requirements, or that would mean that those not being met or otherwise materially and adversely impact the project. It's a little vague. Yeah, I don't know if that's defined somewhere. And I guess just to step back, I mean, my main concern with this part of the, I mean, as you said, the key is before they file, if we're only giving ourselves, and by ourselves, I don't know, that's another question, is ourselves council? Do we, the planning commission, have any input in that, or is it just, I mean, whoever that's going to be, if we're only giving ourselves 10 or 15 business days, that pre-application period becomes very crucial. And for us, I think the key, just looking at the site, I mean, the proximity to the high school, I think is the most, probably the most important thing to get right. What's going to happen on this land, at that back rear portion that's the closest to Meridian, and how it relates to the high school from a use perspective, from a bulk perspective, all of that. So obviously the pre-application phase is really important, but then, as we all know, the land use process is inherently unpredictable, and I'm somewhat familiar with the Fairfax process. I should say on the record, I have no formal role at all in anything related to West Falls Church. So, but I understand. I know the process, just like any public land use process, can be fraught with unexpected things and recommendations, and ultimately the Planning Commission and the Board of Supervisors there, may have certain opinions, or the neighbors in Fairfax may have certain opinions. And so I think that defining what that material modification, might mean, I think is important. If they're presented with comments from Fairfax County asking them to make some significant changes to their site design, their layout, giving ourselves an ability to have some say, and I guess that provision C there is trying to do that. I think it's important that we maybe define that a little bit more clearly to protect ourselves in that event. Because minimum site standards, I mean, the tricky thing about minimum site requirements, I imagine in Fairfax this is going to be zoned to some type, what Fairfax uses, like a planned district, some type of P district they call it, and which doesn't have a lot of defined minimum site requirements. Everything's kind of open to negotiation if it's going to be a planned district. And so I think it's important that we define what that means, because there are very few minimum site requirements for a planned district in Fairfax, and it's important that we define that. So I was going to bring that up separately because since Ms. Weiss brought it up, I kind of agree that it's important that we protect ourselves, especially again with respect to how this will relate, whatever happens on this site relates to the high school. So, and I don't know if you have an answer tonight on what number C, what letter C is, and I know you're looking for us to make a recommendation to go back to council, and that's fine. We're not looking to throw a monkey wrench necessarily, but I think when it goes back to council, and I don't know if any council members raised that as a concern, that would be something that I would, just to my fellow commissioners, I would recommend that if we do make a motion to recommend this, I'm not presupposing, but if we do, then I would think we should include I would recommend we make some, or ask for some clarification, or recommend the council add a clarification to that provision, just to protect the city. Yeah. So I guess that was more of a comment than a question, but I don't know if you have any response to that, Mr. Shields, as far as where that provision C came from and what we're looking to achieve there. I think we have to be careful, but just with that phrase minimum site requirements, because they're inherently flexible in the zoning district that I imagine they're going to be looking to zone this to.
One other section that is relevant to this discussion is Section 6D, Seller and Purchaser Cooperation. I think just the nature of the way this is going to work is they have to go through that Fairfax County process. If there are things that, there is going to be an element of good faith on this, and then ultimately the city as the seller does retain power, but it's, we're going into this without sort of clear definitions. I think we're going to know it if we see it, and in some respects that's not bad for the city. We do have expectations in terms of harmony with the high school and how the project interfaces with Mustang Alley. I think we'll get a good look at those in the submissions, and then we'll have our opportunity to comment on it. If those change materially through the process, then I think we're going to be relying on good faith cooperation with the county.
Okay. Any other questions or comments from other commissioners? Okay. Let's see, I think I had a couple other, you actually answered some of the other questions. The question about the 10 days you said was going to be extended to 15 business days or something like that. And also, I don't, as far as who is going to be involved in that review, is that something like the council is going to review formally, or, are they going to ask us to take a look at that? Who is going to be, is that something that's going to happen internally with city staff? Who some combination? Who is going to participate in that 15 business day review period, or even in the before that?
Yeah, I think it's the before that is where we're really going to get the most information. We really are not looking for surprises in that 15-day period. That should be just a confirmation of what we've already seen. I'm envisioning that the school board, the city council, and the planning commission.
Okay, that was going to be my question. I was going to recommend that we have some ability to participate in that, so that's good to hear. Okay. Just making sure I covered all my other questions. I think so. Obviously the Northern Virginia, the smart construction piece of it, that center I think is also somewhat, I guess we're putting it in there as a requirement, as a minimum requirement. So if somehow if that drops out, that's the kind of thing that I could see, things happen with ideas like that. It sounds like an exciting idea, but it sounds like the way this is the agreement is set up. If that part of it, if something happens to that, then that's the agreement needs to be revised. Is that correct? Like, in order for this to go forward, the purchaser is committing to 40,000 square feet for the smart construction center. So if something happens to that, I know there have been some questions about Virginia Tech's role in this and what, sort of what that smart construction may be or may not be, but the purchaser can't just delete that and just on their own. They would need to renegotiate this agreement.
That's
The way
correct.
it's worded. Okay. I think that's important for people to know that they're committing to that, and it's not something they can just say, well, sorry, we changed our mind, it's not going to work out, and drop it later, because it seems like that's been a key part of it. I think what it's going to look like is, I looked at some of the Virginia Tech promotional material or press releases that have come out, and I think it sounds like it's still a work in progress, but it's important to note that it is in there as a commitment that they need to meet. All right, if there are no other questions or comments, another one. Ms. Weiss, go ahead.
I just want to clarify the alternative to this option. So the alternative to this option is that Virginia Tech can buy the land from us for an obscenely low amount of money, and then the condition is that the use has to be for education and government purposes. How long does that use requirement last? In other words, could Virginia Tech turn around and sell the land in the next year, 5 years, whatever, and change that use if they sell it?
So if Virginia Tech wanted to exercise the option, but also then sell it for some other uses other than government or education, then there would need to be a negotiation on value, because that price is based on continuing just the government and educational uses. So that would be a separate negotiation. So it's not just well, if they want to keep it as educational, then they can write a check, and that's the end of the discussion. If they want to do other things with the property, then there's a negotiation with the city.
I guess my question is, how long does that requirement of use last in perpetuity?
That use
2035,
restriction.
isn't it?
2035, the term.
Well, the lease agreement actually does provide for those use restrictions to survive the lease, so long as we are operating a school immediately adjacent to the property. So in any event, there would be a negotiation. So even if it were down the road, there would still be that negotiation if they were to change the uses.
Okay. Let's see, if there are no other comments at this time from commissioners, this is a public action item, public hearing, so we will open, it sounds like we have a member of the public that has signed up to speak virtually. Mr. Trainer, I guess this time we'll open it up to the public, and is that individual on the line?
Yes, I am. Can you hear me?
We do hear you. If you can just give us your name and address for the record, and then you'll have 3 minutes.
Yeah, my name is Paul Rothstein. I'm a resident. I'm at 7024 Falls Reach Drive. I am a resident on Haycock Road, next to the soon-to-be former Virginia Tech site. Earlier today, I received an email response to a Freedom of Information Act request. I ask you to ask for a copy of that exchange from City Planner Jack Trainer before making a recommendation to the City Council. I also sent the exchange to Chairman Krasner via LinkedIn a few minutes ago. In April, the City Council was told that there is an independent appraisal justifying the value of the soon-to-be former Virginia Tech parcel. As it turns out, there is no independent appraisal to justify that price. I think there should be. I had not intended to speak about that matter. I may go over a few seconds as a result, and I hope you'll understand that. I ask you to look at Section 4C of the proposed agreement between Converge and Falls Church. The section addresses the parallel road to Haycock Road. To quote Fairfax County Planning Commissioner John Ohlfelder in materials that you have, quote, "The parallel road from the City of Falls Church redevelopment site through the Virginia Tech site is critical. Redevelopment of the current Virginia Tech site will have to accommodate and include the new road. Otherwise, none of the plans for the area make any sense," unquote. Section 4C sets out a series of options for the road. One of them includes the following, quote, "Converge will use best efforts to ensure that the design and scope of the road is generally consistent with the applicable provisions of the grant," unquote. The grant is a $2 million payment from the Commonwealth. I asked Falls Church's real estate attorney to describe what those grant provisions are. He has not responded. The term best efforts sometimes just means the obligation to diligently try to do something, but not the obligation to actually accomplish it. I'm a lawyer. I deal with this. I asked Falls Church's real estate attorney to explain what best efforts means under Virginia law. He has not responded. I am concerned that the term generally consistent will result in a road that will not be to the benefit of Falls Church and your neighbors. This is particularly true because the approvals for all the projects on Haycock are based on traffic impact analyses that must have assumptions about the parallel road. I encourage you to advise the City Council to put in more concrete minimum conditions now and to ask your council to draft language to minimize the likelihood of road construction delays if there's a recession. Finally, on June 1st, Commissioner Hyra referenced the use of the $8 million generated by the sale. In the 3 adjacent Haycock projects, in addition to the retail, restaurants, and HIT corporate campus, there will be over 2,000 new residences. When children walk to and from school across Haycock Road, and when people walk to the West Falls project, they will encounter substantially more traffic than before. Please consider options to reduce the contact between pedestrians and the traffic. Perhaps that includes a vehicle underpass or a pedestrian overpass. In August 2019, on Shreve Road, which is the same road as Haycock, a little over 1,000 feet from the corner of Haycock and Route 7, a woman was killed and her son was injured by a car. In January 2020, a car severely injured a child crossing the street in front of Longfellow Middle School, which is less than 2 miles away from Meridian High School. And 11 days ago, a car hit a pedestrian at the corner of Great Falls and Haycock, less than a mile away from Meridian High School. I hope that you will use this additional money to protect children and other pedestrians and bicyclists from the danger that will inevitably result from the increased traffic resulting from these 3 projects. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Rothstein. We appreciate your information you provided and your perspective. Mr. Shields, I mean, we didn't talk about that before, but since the neighbor here to the project mentioned it, the situation with the road, can you explain how the agreement is set up with regards to the grant and the construction of that road? Just for his benefit and for the benefit of anyone in the public who is also watching or listening. Item 4C.
Yeah, so thank you for that invitation to talk about that a little bit more. So one is, just to note, is that the road itself is one of the minimum requirements. And so if the road is not built, then that's a default under the agreement. The Section 4B is a provision to deal with the grant. And really kind of what the purpose of that section is that if we were to elect to use any of the Smart City grant dollars for the bricks and mortar of this road construction, that would not accrue to the benefit of the developer, but that the value of that grant then would be used to increase the purchase price so that returns to the city. It is the developer's intention not to use grant funds for the road. We've had these discussions, and so this entire Section 4B is likely not going to be exercised. One of the key things that the city has wanted is to make sure that the road gets built in a timely fashion, and the grant funds could be used to accelerate it if market forces or whatever the case may be were to slow down the development as a whole. The guarantees on the construction of the road is one area of it's kind of one of the last things that is being discussed in terms of final refinement to this agreement. There is a milestone schedule for the completion of the road. There is the commitment that the road would be built and open to the public on the front end of the construction of the project as opposed to on the back end. So that's where that 2026 milestone date comes into play. The county has made it very clear that this road is crucial for all of the land use approvals for the site. So the city and the county are on exactly the same page in that respect. I believe that before this gets fully executed, there will be satisfactory guarantees on the completion of the road.
Okay, thanks for that, Mr. Shields. And for what it's worth, I mean, I think the county feels the road is just as important as we do. And I'm not speaking from any personal knowledge, but just in general, I mean, just from what I've observed as that public process has gone on for the comp plan amendments at West Falls Church, I think the parallel road, as the speaker noted, Commissioner Ohlfelder, and who's the planning commissioner for the Drainesville district. This is in the Drainesville district. I think his view is shared by many others on the commission and with the Fairfax County Department of Transportation, who's been heavily involved in that. And so I would think that the road will be a key part of that project as it's reviewed. And so I think that's something that is important to identify, but I have no doubt that that'll be a key aspect of the review process when this is submitted to the county. So, but it is good. It's an important part to bring up. I mean, the amount of additional development that's going to occur between our portion and the county portion is substantial. It's going to take what's essentially at this time, a relatively sleepy, underused area next to a metro station, which is unusual next to a metro station, and really turn it into something exciting. But with that comes a lot of traffic and transportation challenges, which I know the county's been busy looking at as we were on our portion of it. But I appreciate the speaker for bringing that up and looking at that, because it is a critical aspect of any kind of project like this where you're increasing density to this degree. Okay, Mr. Trainer, is there any other speakers on this item? Any other speakers from the public?
I had a follow-up comment.
Sure. Okay, well, then I'll just close the public comment portion, and then Mr. Stevens, go ahead.
Yeah, just quickly to follow up on one other point that Mr. Rothstein raised, and that is the safe routes to school. I would say even if we weren't getting $8 million, that would be an absolute top-of-the-page kind of concern that the city will want to look at very carefully. So whether we get that money or not, that issue is a paramount concern.
Absolutely, absolutely. Okay, so at this point, since there's no other speakers, there's no other, unless the commissioners have any other questions for Mr. Shields or Mr. Fuller, we should deliberate on this item and decide what we want to do. And I guess we'll look for, if someone wants to start with a motion, and then we have the draft motion that staff has prepared for us, and if we want to add anything to that, we can discuss that. So does anyone on the commission feel so bold as to be prepared to make a motion on this item to recommend to council? Anybody? Everyone's being a little quiet tonight. Well, if there are other questions, we can continue to talk about where we want to go on this if no one's ready to make a motion yet. I mean, I know the city's under, there's a time frame that's been laid out, but that's what the process is for. So,
Mr. Chair, I'm happy to go ahead and utilize the staff recommended motion to get this on the table for us to adjust it in any way that the other commissioners might want to consider.
I think that's a good start.
Whereas the city and property owners have negotiated mutually agreeable terms for the following land purchase and sale. 1, purchase of property owned by Virginia Tech, Fairfax County Tax Map Number 0403-01-0092, by the City of Falls Church. 2, including a second existing property in Fairfax County, property owned by the City of Falls Church, Fairfax County Tax Map Number 0403-02-0092A, and then, number 3, sale of the combined properties, Fairfax County Tax Map Number 0403-01-0092, and number 0403-02-0092A, totaling 7.4 acres to Converge West Falls LLC. And whereas the city's adopted West End Area Plan and Comprehensive Plan 2018 amendment goals and strategies support the city's recently approved West Falls mixed-use project and related land use and zoning strategies to transform the city's West End area into a vibrant live, work, plan, learn community that is thoughtfully planned to achieve high standards for economic benefits and environmental sustainability and resiliency as shared community goals. And whereas the city's land use and community planning goals, depending on public and private investment in the West End area and vicinity in partnership with adjacent property owners with strategies intended to encourage larger-scale redevelopment and/or phase development that allow for greater opportunities for joint land use planning, comprehensive and integrated redevelopment of adjacent properties in Fairfax County, and the West Falls Church Metro Rail Station vicinity. And whereas the future land use changes, planned redevelopment, urban and transportation design elements will support the completion of the East Falls Boulevard, including smart street technology and multimodal transportation connections to the West Falls Metro, are based on smart growth principles, including transit-oriented design, will promote the economic success and vibrancy of the city's West End development, and encourages innovation and technology. Now, therefore, I move that the Planning Commission recommend that the City of Falls Church, under the terms of Ordinance TO 22-13, purchase and sell the subject property according to the agreement of sale between Virginia Polytechnic Institute and the City of Falls Church, and the agreement of sale between Converge West Falls LLC and the City of Falls Church.
Okay, we have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Second by Ms. Weiss, thank you. Okay, now discussion. Any discussion on the motion that anyone would like to, any changes or comments people would like to make?
I just have a comment, which is not really directed to the land sale, but I just kind of catches me the wrong way. Where we talk about the environmental sustainability, and I know this refers to our side of the line here, but even there, to me, and I mean, in light of these really extreme temperatures that we're seeing surfacing around the world, to me, any building that continues to emit greenhouse gases, and there's no plan for the buildings either on this side of the line or on the other side to be net zero, therefore, they're going to contribute greenhouse gases to the atmosphere, and so it's tough for me to characterize these as environmentally sustainable anymore. But like I say, that's not part of the direct purpose that we have here. But I just find it difficult to not say something to that effect.
Appreciate that. Understood, Mr. Stevens. So you're not looking to revise that, but you're just kind of
No,
just your commentary.
Yeah, just highlighting on how we should start to look at environmental sustainability. I know that has a number of dimensions, but any building that we approve that is not net zero, it's adding to the problem.
Understood. Okay. I mean, I know I mentioned before. I'll jump in here for discussion about maybe. Well, I think a couple things might be helpful. I know Mr. Shields just indicated, as far as that review, that a very critical aspect of review during the, I guess what I'll call like the pre-application phase. And I'm sorry, Mr. Shields, where is that discussed in the agreement? That's under item, because if we're going to add something to it, I want to see exactly where that's included. Because I think to me that is really there are a lot of critical aspects to this. But as far as the Planning Commission, and I will say, since I have the floor, and for the benefit of the speaker and anyone else listening, our role as the Planning Commission in this process is somewhat limited. The city charter prescribes our role that we provide guidance primarily based on the comprehensive plan with regards to acquisition or disposition of property. In this case, this land is not within our corporate limits. It's adjacent to it. So we don't have any formal comp plan guidance on this property. But with that said, we are able to apply the policies and guidance for the land surrounding it, which is in the city. But ultimately, some of the issues are most properly handled by council with regards to some of the real nuts and bolts and terms here. But and the council is going to have another public hearing on this. Assuming we make the recommendation, they're going to have that, I believe, next week, according to the schedule. So there will be another opportunity to present comments and concerns to council, who has final authority on exactly what the terms of this will look like. So anyhow, but I'm sorry, Mr. Shields. So where exactly is that part of it in
Section 6B.
6B? Okay. I don't know how my other commissioners feel, but I'd like to see something that makes it clear that the Planning Commission will participate in any review of the plans as they're developed, or the conceptual plans. Let's see, how is that worded here? Maybe it's simple enough just to say that pursuant to item or paragraph 6B of the of the agreement. We recommend that the Planning Commission have an opportunity to review and comment on the proposal, something to that effect, because I think that gives us the opportunity to address a lot of the concerns I had as far as the physical form anything on the site will take in relationship to the land in the city. So I guess for me, that's the one recommendation I'll make. I mean, there are other things, like I said, there are things about this agreement that I have opinions on, but I think a lot of that is properly dealt with by the council. It doesn't relate to sort of it doesn't relate to the comp plan, whereas, the actual physical form and how it relates to land in the city, I think does. So I would recommend that I'd make a friendly amendment that we add some language, and let me try to word this, or wordsmith it, under, let's see, so at the very end of Mr. Stevens' motion, let's see, of course, now I lost that page. I have too many tabs open here. Here we go. So under now, therefore, I move, so I guess at the end of that paragraph, we move all those things that they're in that paragraph, and then and then after that period, say subject to or with the following recommendations, and then that the Planning Commission be afforded the opportunity to review and provide comments or recommendations on the development plans prior to the formal 10-day, because it's in our draft it still says 10 days prior to the formal 10-day review period. Does that cover it?
I'm okay with that. And the spirit of that is recommendation back to
Right.
council.
We would have the ability to review, comment, and provide recommendation to the council
Right.
on those plans.
I accept that amendment.
Great. Does the seconder accept that? Ms. Weiss?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else have anything they'd like to put on the record or recommend to council here on this item?
I just have a question for planning commissioners or staff about the level of detail that Fairfax County final development plans are. I mean, what's in the land use application is rezoning and a final development plan. What is that? Is that like a site plan? Is that what we're talking about?
It's not at the level
What does
of
that mean?
In Fairfax, it's not at the level of a site plan, but it's very specific. And any site plan submitted needs to be in substantial conformance with the final development plan. So it's quite specific, and it should provide a level of detail that the city needs to. It should have the level of detail that we need to feel comfortable as far as what the final form will look like. It allows at site plan there can be minor modifications, but if anything that would materially affect the project triggers the need to amend that FDP, as they call it.
My understanding is they've only just changed the comp plan at present, so there's a lot of material still to be developed and submitted and so forth.
Okay, Ms. Coleman, go ahead.
There's a reference to East Falls Boulevard. Should that be West Falls Station Boulevard, or is that the correct name?
Yeah, it should be West Falls Station Boulevard.
Oh, in the motion.
Thank
Yeah.
you. I kind of caught myself when I saw the East
Good-
Falls.
Good catch.
Wait a minute, that's over where I live.
Good catch. Okay, that's a typo.
Thank you. I accept that.
I will change east to west. I think the seconder has no objection to that. Okay, good. All right, so any other discussion on that motion? Go ahead, Ms. Weiss.
This is another question for commissioners and staff. So I just want to step back and say, I think it's in everybody's interest to make this project work. So I feel like big picture, I think everybody's interests are aligned. So, but the devil's in the details. So the language on a material modification, I'm not a lawyer with all caveats here, but if there's a material modification to the land use application, material modification means any modification to the land use application that would result in the minimum site requirements not being met, and Mr. Krasner just said those are pretty flexible, or would otherwise materially and adversely impact the project as determined by purchaser and purchaser's sole but reasonable discretion. And then later in that paragraph, it says, if purchaser elects not to move forward, or sorry, there's something in there that says the purchaser can move forward with non-material modifications at its own discretion. So it just strikes me that aside from differences from the minimum site requirements, the purchaser can determine what is a material and what is not a material.
Well, actually, and as I reread it, I was thinking, and I apologize, I was thinking of the county's minimum site requirements. The agreement defines
In the language.
and I think they're looking at it as essentially the purchaser's minimum requirements, what they are committing to build. And so they're, I guess, anticipating a situation where somehow the county planning commission or the board of supervisors are not prepared to approve one of those items in 6A. Or that's the sort of the recommendation they're getting there, that if the wind's blowing in Fairfax are telling them they're not going to get one of those items in 6A, little Roman numeral I through whatever. So that's what they're talking about. So it's the commercial office building at $240,000 for HIT, including the $40,000 institutional office for the smart construction center, the 440 residential with ground floor retail, and the road improvements for the road. So those are the items. So that's being committed to. I guess no more, no less.
So that's fair. I guess my question is, outside of those minimum site requirements, the purchaser can decide what is material and what is not material and make decisions on that in their own discretion. I don't know what types of decisions would fall outside of, I mean, I guess a lot of decisions could fall outside of the minimum site requirements. I guess my question is, does it make sense? I understand why we don't want to get very specific
materially.
at this point in time,
Right.
because we
Well,
don't know how it'll shake out, but do we have any say in what a material modification is outside of changing those minimum site requirements?
Seems a little vague. I mean, they talk about adversely impacting it as determined by the purchaser and the purchaser's sole but reasonable discretion, whatever that means. That's kind of leaves a lot of wiggle room, I think. I mean, I mean, I think for us, we have to think about, is there anything in the way they define material modification? I mean, is there anything else that's not included in that now that we think should be? I mean, as far as what they're committing to do, is there anything else that, I mean, that, to me, that would be something we'd want to mention or recommend to council. If we think that there's anything in 6C, or I'm sorry, 6A, that either we think doesn't need to be in there or should be in there, because to me, that's the key. I mean, it does provide them some room to back out, but then at that point, if it's the purchaser backing out, then I guess this, as we mentioned earlier, the city seems to be still protected in the sense that we still own the land. But as far as protecting what we want to see on the site, I think that's the key part, that if there was something where the county powers that be aren't ready to support some other aspect of it, that we feel is vital from our perspective, I mean, that's, I think, where we need to, I'd be more concerned about that. That's just my take on it in 6A. I mean, if the purchaser backs out because they feel they've been adversely impacted, but it doesn't affect, the end of the items in 6A, it's some other aspect of it, I suppose then the deal maybe falls apart and we're left still as the owner, since we're not closing till after, of course, the approvals would be in place. So I don't know, I'm kind of rambling, but I think from my view, I think we're okay, the way, even though it's somewhat vague language in there, but I don't know. Does anyone else have any thoughts on that? Go ahead. Scott.
Would this be a place where we could specify a buffer for the high school? I mean, I think that's my main concern, is
We
the
could recommend
proximity
that.
of the building.
We could certainly recommend that. I mean,
Wyatt, is that possible to add in these minimum site requirements some buffer distance for the high school?
I mean, I know that.
I'm listening to what you all are saying and looking at that section. So I think maybe generically, the thing to do would be to provide a bit more clarity about what happens as it's going through the county land use process if things change that aren't necessarily impacting the minimum standards, but are things that the city still could care a lot about. So I wonder if the recommendation could be phrased fairly broadly to recommend that the city be granted more we need to kind of work on the wording exactly. It is a sensitive point. This got discussed quite a bit. They really do want a track through the county and not have two localities. There's no question that is something that's been important in our prior discussions. However, if there is, we do need to look out for the city's interests as it goes through the county process in a bit more of a formal way. Let me.
I have a suggestion based on just the logic of it, because I don't know that we want to add to 6A right now. I don't feel, I personally am in the position to do that, having not done the work, other than in principle, absolutely, I want more of a buffer for the high school. But can we make a recommendation that prior to the submittal of the land use application, the purchaser and the seller can together add to the minimum site requirements or define what would be a material change at that point? In other words, we know it's material now, it's the minimum site requirements, plus whatever the purchaser thinks is material. Can we agree on another point at which the city and the seller and the purchaser together take one more crack at it?
I think what we'd be getting at is a material modification to the land use approval application. So we've given approval to the application. What happens if there's a material modification, not to the minimum standards, but to
Anything
the
else.
application that we saw? So I think there's a way to get at that. And so I'm just trying to craft an amendment to the motion that states that intent broadly, but gives us a little bit of room to get the language right with the legal team.
Right, and I think it is important because things like that, because technically, I think the way county, typically, if they're looking at a multifamily building adjacent to a school, I don't know if they de facto, even outside the county boundary, I don't know if it would have automatically a buffer requirement or screening requirement, anything like that nature in this kind of district. And so I think it is important that obviously we'll have an opportunity on the front end before it's submitted to look at the plans and try to ensure. But if somehow something else happens in the county process that squeezes them, and I say squeezes the plan on another side, they may be tempted to push it back away from, and I don't know, with the speaker tonight notwithstanding, I don't know the folks in the condos there, what their view is, but if they start saying, well, we want this further away from us, things could migrate towards the other side. I've seen that happen before, so I think it is important that we put that out there. Certainly, obviously on the front end, but then, somewhere if we could somehow protect that, after it's already been submitted, that may be prudent.
Well, we can assume the school board will be looking at that pretty carefully,
They will.
too.
They will. I think we all will. But if it's already in the in the public process in Fairfax, and that's what the developer is or the purchaser is hearing from the Fairfax side, again at that point they're looking to get approval through that side, and they may be
Right.
if the agreement allows them doesn't prohibit them from doing that, they may be inclined to shift things because. That's the path of least resistance, as it were. And I know council I know there were some council members who were concerned about this as well, so they may talk about this more next week. But I know they mentioned it as well, the effect on the high school and what this will look like. I mean, the heights of this building. I don't know if we talked about that tonight. I don't know how tall they're looking at here. I don't know if it's
I
quite as tall.
mentioned there was a shadow potential, once you put the solar panels on the top of the high school.
Right. I mean, they're looking at, I don't know if they're looking at as tall as like what we have on our other corner at 15 stories, but I'm sure they're looking at something fairly dense. So it's something, it's not an insignificant point here.
Can we recommend, I'm just looking at the language in 6C again, can we, that the planning commission just recommend, as part of this motion, recommend that city council and city staff prior to the submission of the land use application, redefine minimum site requirements, or that there be an addendum to the minimum site requirements for determination of what a material modification is? Does that make sense?
That might be one avenue. Kind of a broader statement might be, recommends the city reserves the right to comment on material changes to the land use application after submittal. Which we certainly have that right.
Yeah.
Unless this agreement could be interpreted to say, no, you had your one chance, which I need to go back and sort of circle through and just, that would not be a great outcome. But if it's phrased that way, that does, I think, still address the concern that they're going to be navigating two processes in parallel, which I understand would be very difficult. So let me just state it again. Recommends the city reserves the right to comment on material changes to the land use application after submittal. Would make that clarification.
To me, that doesn't seem to change what would already be
Our
true,
rights anyway,
right? Because we
yeah.
can comment and they can say thank you and then move on and not pay attention to the comments. I guess what I'm looking for, I mean, I understand the purchaser doesn't want to have to deal with two jurisdictions at the same time, but it does seem like we need to at some point be able to confirm whether or not we think those minimum site requirements are our minimum site requirements as
Yeah,
well.
I mean, I think, I'm thinking of like this, how this play, and I understand from their perspective as an applicant in Fairfax, going through a zoning process there, they're going to be receiving comments and feedback from the county, and so, I mean, I'm not, and I have not, of course, been party to any of these discussions, and I don't know exactly what the sort of what the tone has been and how the relationship is. I assume it's amicable enough. We've made it this far. It's a complicated arrangement, and so I know that, and I know there's language there that talks about best efforts and good faith and all of that stuff. I just think that there's, and maybe for us as the planning commission, we have to, I think, put out what we feel is important, and then ultimately let council decide if they want to change or change some of the terms of this agreement. I mean, that's really all we can do. I think we need to put that out there, that we feel that the buffer and that the way this project will relate to the land in the city, especially the high school, is of paramount importance. I think for the purposes of tonight, I don't know if we need Mr. Shields to rewrite the agreement. I mean, I think we need to tell council what we feel is important. If, as far as our recommendation, if they're going to go forward and sell this land, and leave it to them to make the final call. I think ultimately that's what the charter is telling us to do. This agreement is really between the council as the elected body of the city and this private developer to do this transaction. So I think we need to make it clear what we feel is important, but I don't know if we need to rewrite the terms of the agreement tonight. I mean, I think we can make recommendations, but we don't have to be so specific as to wordsmith all the legal terms tonight. So, I mean, if it's just as a way to move forward, I would say we should enumerate what we feel are the key aspects as far as what minimum requirements maybe should include as well, if we feel that those need to be expanded, or if we feel that the city needs some type of role during the development review. The development review process in the county is iterative like it is here, and if we think we need some role, before they resubmit and make changes, I mean, that's an idea as well, that we have some ability for them to share their revisions before they resubmit them to the county. Once they do their initial submission, it goes through a process like it does here, and they get a whole bunch of comments, and then they need to revise and resubmit. So maybe there's a role for us to be able to review that, or someone in the city to review that. So those are some of the ideas maybe we can put forward to council and see if they feel that they want to add those. But I think that's maybe the best we can do. I think for me, I don't know if I'm just speaking for myself. I think I'm ready to support this with those recommendations, and then, from a comp plan perspective, and then leave it to council to decide how they want to adjust the agreement or not.
I guess I'm not clear precisely what that is. So the one recommendation we have is, I can't remember already.
Well, I made a recommendation or a revision that that the planning commission have a role in the review before pre-application, pre-submittal. It sounds like you're recommending that to mention the buffer between this project and the school site, and perhaps also we want to recommend that the city have a formal role through the agreement in the review of any revisions or any resubmittals to the county. Is that what I'm kind of hearing you say, Ms. Weiss? I don't want to speak for you, but
I'm specifically concerned with the purchaser being able to make all decisions about what a material modification is outside of the minimum site requirements enumerated here before we've even really gotten started on this development process.
Okay.
And so I guess the recommendation I would make is to City Council is to work to ensure that the city has some say in determining what a material modification is to the land use application beyond
okay.
changes to minimum site requirements.
We feel that, right, as it's currently worded, perhaps it's not necessarily too vague, but too permissive for the purchaser, right, to make that call. All right, we need to somehow put that into the motion here. Do you want to try to propose a revision to the motion to add on as another recommendation?
Can somebody start, so we have PCB afforded a review. Should we write down all of our recommendations?
Yeah, and actually, Mr. Trainer, I think we were going to say, prior to the 10-day formal review, that we want to be involved in the informal review or whatever we're calling it, the prior to that 10-day or whatever it turns out to be, the pre-submission, right? So prior to the 10-day, not during the 10-day. Yeah. Prior to the 10-day, whatever it's called in the agreement, I don't know how it's worded there, the 10-day review period. Prior to the 10-day review period. Yeah. Okay. Be afforded an opportunity to review and make recommendation to the council.
We recommend that the PC be afforded.
Yeah. Actually, what we'll do is we're going to have a list here. Mr. Trainer, at the end of the paragraph that was prepared by staff, so above your red text, I would just make a comma and say subject to or with the following recommendations. And then with the following recommendations, colon.
With the following conditions?
Or conditions, okay. The following conditions, colon. And so we can just say prior to the 10-day review period, we don't need to say recommend, just the PC, just delete, we recommend. Yeah, the PC be afforded the opportunity to review and make recommendation to council. To review and make recommendation to council on the the land use applications, that's fine. And then, okay, so that's the first one. So the second one, Ms. Weiss, do you want to take a crack at it?
The city, I said it out loud earlier, now I've forgotten what I said. It's something along like that the city revised the definition of material modification to the land use application.
Right. Revised.
In order, what I really want, I don't, that's even too specific. I want the city to have some say in what a material modification is. Or how about the city strengthen the terms of a material modification to ensure that it has, I don't know what the thing is. We can't give up all discretion beyond the minimum requirements currently there. That's what we're doing.
Right,
These
to-
are the minimum
to-
requirements, and then we give up all discretion.
Right, to not, maybe something to the effect of to allow, or to allow the city to have, well, or not give the purchaser sole discretion, because right now it's worded as, it's worded, I think, as, they use the phrase sole discretion.
Yeah.
So maybe we want to say, strengthen the terms of material modification to not give the purchaser sole discretion of making the,
Determining what a
of making the,
material
yeah, of
modification.
making that determination. So do you,
That the,
get that, Mr. Trainer? So the city should strengthen the terms of,
I would say the terms in 6C regarding material modification.
material modification to not give the purchaser
Sole discretion.
sole discretion of making the determination of what is a material modification
Yeah.
or adverse impact, whatever he says, that whatever they say there. Of what is a material modification or adverse impact?
Or adverse
Adverse
to the
impact, because
project.
it uses that
Yeah.
term as well.
Mhm.
Okay, do we want to, and maybe that's enough. I don't know if we want to mention the buffer. I mean, we're going to get an opportunity to review the plans. I think that gives us an opportunity later to talk about it. If they don't provide the buffer, we can talk about it and see what it looks like, and once they've laid it out. I don't think they're at that point yet. Okay, I think those are good. Are there any other suggestions or comments from other commissioners on this? No, for commissioners.
You had suggested that the city have a role in reviewing any resubmittals?
Right, okay, yep, sorry, I forgot I said that. I think that's a worthwhile consideration point for council to look at.
Should I add that to the first one then, or?
Yeah, how about make recommendation to council on, well, yeah, I guess us too, I don't know. I mean, someone in the city, I don't know if it needs to follow the same process, but maybe it should. How about, it'll be a separate recommendation, because I think it's kind of separate. We can just say that the city have a formal role in reviewing and commenting on any resubmittals to Fairfax County. Any resubmittals of the final development plan. Any resubmittals of the final development plan application to Fairfax County. Right. How about any resubmittals or revisions, however they want to phrase it, or revisions of the final development plan? Okay. Any other items? And just to reiterate this, so is the maker of the motion, now that we've made these changes, is the maker of the motion, Mr. Stevens, are you okay with this as we've edited it?
Yes.
Okay. And the seconder, Ms. Weiss, do you still second it, or do you second now with these changes?
I seconded it with these changes.
Okay. I see Mr. Fuller is raising his hand. Yes, Mr.
Yes,
Fuller.
I was wondering if the commission would consider a change in the first statement with the following conditions, that maybe instead of using the word condition, which then makes all the following items a condition of the recommendation, that we change that to, and with specific recommendations that, and then the items would follow.
Yeah. I guess the only question on that is, and maybe you or Mr. Shields can, I mean, we're not looking to throw, at least I'm not looking to throw a monkey wrench in what's been, I know, a long and complicated process. So if is the semantics here, is that going to, if we say conditions and then the council doesn't want to do one of these things, does that blow up the whole deal or what?
I agree with Mr. Fuller's recommendation on that. I think that here's what's going to happen. We're going to take this back to the legal team. There's 3 parties to these agreements. We've got to work through the language, and some of them might be a bit difficult. So
Yeah.
it would be helpful if this were phrased as this is a recommendation. And I think that's very helpful.
Yeah.
And
I'm personally okay with that. And are my other commissioners okay with that? Okay.
So the statement that I had was.
So with the following
substitute-
recommendations.
And with specific recommendations. So in other words, you're doubling down and saying, this is doubly important. We've generally said we're recommending it, but these are specific ones that we.
Following specific recommendations, okay.
That, and then comma.
I think that makes sense
colon,
because what's
sorry.
above there is kind of general, and this is a very detailed.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. I'm fine with that.
So,
All right. Maker of the motion and seconder still okay? Okay?
Yep, it's okay.
Gotta make sure we're good with Robert's rules here. Okay, so we have the revised motion. The maker and the seconder are okay with the amendments. Any final words of wisdom on this? And if not, then we'll need a roll call vote, please, Mr. Trainer.
Yes.
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 Yes?
Yes.
Okay, that's 5 affirmative votes, and so that motion recommending to council that they execute the agreement with, subject to certain recommendations or consideration of certain recommendations, that is passes, and it goes back to council next week, July 25th, I believe it's on their agenda. Okay, thank you, Mr. Shields. Always good to see you. Appreciate you coming out and spending time with us, answering these questions on what's a very, again, complicated, and I'm sure it was has been a time-consuming, will continue to be a labor-intensive process to work on these negotiations. We appreciate your time and your help with this.
Well, thank you. I thought this was a good discussion. I'll also note, I think I stay for the next item on the agenda as well, but I'll wait till that.
I have asked Mr. Shields to, we have an informational item on the council work plan. So since we have him here tonight, we thought we would
Okay.
provide that opportunity to touch on that under the later
Right.
director's report under number 8.
Okay, well, let's have the minutes. Lest we not forget the minutes. Okay, sorry, I'm skipping ahead here.
Yes.
Okay, so that takes us to, before we get to that, we don't want to forget 6B, which are the approval of our minutes from June 15th, 2022. Any edits, revisions, comments on those minutes? Go
I
ahead,
had
Ms. Collins.
some, I think, the underlined language for most of the items it says Ms. Weiss made the motion to adopt the amended minutes. It's repeated to
Oh,
adopt
yeah.
the amended minutes for
Yep.
all 3, and I think
is-
it's actually the first 2 should be
It is
to
indeed.
adopt to, I'm not sure what that first thing was. It was an ordinance for the land transfer of Gibson Street, so we just need to amend that language. And same thing for the purchase of 436 Sharrow Avenue.
And I hope it was Mr.
And then the third one, which is about the item C, which is actually about the minutes, should read to adopt the
Right.
amended minutes. But the other two should be corrected.
Right. You get that, Mr. Trainer?
Line 31, Ms. Weiss made the motion to recommend the land transfer. I don't know if it was a recommendation or an approval.
It was a recommendation.
So to recommend ordinance TO 22-12, perhaps,
Yeah.
and remove the amended minutes and the word adopt. Yeah, and then remove the amended minutes as well.
Right. And that's a similar change for the other items. I don't know, if you don't have to type them with us in real time, as long as you're getting that. You see where on the other ones, it also,
Line
Just-
42.
I think it's just the next one. Mr. Stevens made the motion
42, yeah, same thing,
to adopt the resolution,
right.
seconded by
A little bit
Ms.
of
Comont.
cut and pasting here that went
But
awry.
you just need to remove the words, the amended minutes.
It happens to the best of us.
I believe so.
Yeah. The good news is, Virginia law still requires minutes, but things are getting a lot more streamlined these days because all meetings are recorded and online, and so the good news is that, I don't know, at some point the General Assembly may say we don't even need to take minutes, but not yet. Okay, any other changes or edits to the minutes?
I move we approve the minutes from June 15th
Right, as revised.
as revised.
Okay, and a second on that?
Second.
Second by Ms. Wise. Any discussion? If not, then all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? No.
I
Okay.
abstain.
Ms. Teets abstains. She was not here. And so those minutes are approved, 4-0, 4-0 with one abstention. Okay, so we've done that. That takes us to item 7, which is our work session, which we don't have. And then item 8, our informational items. Any planning commissioners report? Sometimes the summer is slow, but with this group, I know people have found meetings to go to and things to do. So, Mr. Stevens?
I attended the AAB meeting. They reviewed the site plan for Founders Row 2, and they did recommend some changes. So at some point, if that does come back to us, even if it's just for review, there will perhaps be
I heard something about this. Is that related to the mural or the wall or?
No, this is Founders Row 2.
Oh, 2. I heard something about
Yeah,
Founders Row 1.
they talked about the roof line. Right now, it's a very straight roof line, and this is, I've heard the AAB talk about this in the past. They like to see some articulation on the roof line. Signage, they talked about that. We also suggested that the sidewalk that goes from the plaza down to the street level be wider than it was. But again, these are kind of minor points, but I just thought I'd tell you that it'll probably look slightly different than when we saw it.
Okay.
And I think that's all I had.
Thank you, Mr. Stevens. Anybody else have any reports they would like to share? I'm not seeing any. Okay, so we will move on then to the director's report. Mr. Fuller.
Thank you. I have 3 items. The Founders Row Administrative Site Plan Amendment, wanted to provide that as an informational item to you. Then secondly, we have the draft council work plan with the city manager here. And then after that, I do a brief update on what's coming up on your agendas in August. So to start off with the Founders Row Administrative Site Plan, the developers applied for a amendment to adjust the building height, and this is based on the new theater vendor and what their requirements are. They actually have an IMAX type of theater as part of the theater, that they would have multiple theaters. and that requires the roof to be raised for a portion of the roof for 12 feet, and that would be an area of 75 by 72 feet in rectangular form, and then 12 feet higher. And it's located towards away from the street to the back of the building, and it generally lines up with, if you could bring up the plans, Jack, please. Aligns with the eastern facade of the building. So these plans were included, so you'd have a chance to see these. Staff is reviewing them now. And then the AEB did see it at their July 13th meeting and had no comments other than one of the members indicated that they thought the developer was coming back to make a material change, and they thought that that wasn't appropriate this late. But other than that, they had no substantive comments on the plans, and this is under administrative review by staff and the planning director. So as a courtesy, we always bring those to you, just so you're informed of what's going on, and especially on a plan that you previously approved the site plan. As noted, the mural would not change. It's already in a rectangular form, and there's no sense in adding a little addition on the back, left upper part. So anyway, just was bringing these as an informational item to you, and if you have any questions tonight or any thoughts, feel free to contact me as we, formalize this review and approval.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Fuller.
All right. Then the next item would be the draft council work plan, and I would invite the city manager, Wyatt Shields. Thank you.
All right, well, thank you. It's good to be back. So we do have drafts of the draft council work plan, and just a couple notes on it. The basic template for this is one that the city council has followed for a couple of cycles in a row. It is a 2-year work plan, and so it starts on July 1 and covers the current fiscal year and next fiscal year. Essentially, the term, those two, the kind of 1.5 terms of the elected council members, or 1.5, 3/4 of the remaining term. The template for this was first developed actually by Paul Stoddard and his work in facilitating a retreat from the city council, and the council has generally used the Paul Stoddard template since he's developed it. The work plan is organized along the city council, or the comprehensive plan that was developed by the Planning Commission and adopted about 3 years ago now in terms of the vision and the vision values. So it's organized under small town character in an urban setting, economic sustainability and vitality, safe and complete streets for mobility and accessibility, public health and public safety, environmental sustainability and leadership, and inclusiveness and social sustainability, effective and responsive government services, and partnerships for education. So those are kind of the buckets on which the areas of change that the City Council has prioritized over the coming 2 years. Their thinking in terms of engaging with the Planning Commission and other boards and commissions on this is to, this really is kind of the council's thinking of here's what's important to us as the elected officials. And then the request is that the Planning Commission consider this and think about this in terms of your 2-year work plan so that there's alignment between what the City Council and the Planning Commission are doing. So a lot of these will be familiar to you. So we've highlighted the ones where the Board and Commission is named as the Planning Commission would be in the lead on it. So as an example, in small town character in an urban setting, we have placed the East End area planning opportunity area in that bucket, and the Planning Commission I know is working on that. The City Council has not had a briefing on that for a couple of months, but we are scheduling that soon. The next one with the Planning Commission's involvement And this is a council request to update the city's streetscape design guidelines with a focus not on all of the design guidelines, streetscape guidelines, but focusing on the question of brick sidewalks and brick pedestrian crossings, whether those would remain the preferred option. I'll go through these and be happy to have any clarifications or comment after that, if that suits you. Under economic sustainability and vitality, the adoption of the T-zone zoning code amendment, and with additional staff, that process will be kind of re-engaging with, and I know with the staff that just came on board this week, we'll be able to move that forward. The next item in this area is updating residential parking requirements. That would be in the second half of the 2-year work plan. Moving to safe and complete streets for mobility. We have $1.4 million of ARPA dollars going for new sidewalks in the city. We've kind of characterized those traditionally as filling in the missing links, and so we want to engage with the Planning Commission in that discussion, as well as the CACT, and having a good plan for the use of that $1.4 million. We will have kind of a lens of social equity, underinvested areas of the city historically, as well as safe routes to school. The ADA transition plan, that is something that we have not updated for a number of years. That's where we address things like what is our plan for getting utility poles out of the middle of the sidewalks, and addressing other of our ADA issues throughout the city. So that transition plan is a really important planning document for us. The bike master plan, that's another big and important thing that a lot of people are very interested in. We have Virginia Tech coming in the fall to do a student study that will help get that started, and then the intent is for staff to work those recommendations internally to update the bike master plan. The Parks and Open Space Connection Study, connecting the WNOD with Berman Park, Howard Herman Stream Valley Park, and Cavalier Trail. I think Planning Commission is aware of that study, and that also will be coming through the Planning Commission. Bus rapid transit, really that one is just to engage with the regional effort on that. The Smart Cities Grant, I believe you've been briefed on that by Cindy Mester, to stay engaged in that as we implement that $10 million program in partnership with Virginia Tech. The Park Avenue Great Streets Project, we're at 30% engineered design plans. We're having a walking tour on August 1, which everybody here is invited and really encouraged to attend. We want to review the planning, where we are right now. The Planning Commission was crucial in helping us get that grant, which is a really big grant, I think plus $10 million plus to underground all the utility wires and address Park Avenue really from the library to the State Theater. I'm going to skip down to environmental sustainability and leadership. One of the big ones that's happening in that, the ESC is going to be kind of the lead board and commission for that, but that is adopting our community energy plan. We have a contract with COG to help us put that together, and we are in recruitment right now for Kate Walker's replacement, who will be our staff lead for that project. And then following right on the heels of the community energy plan will be the government energy plan, which really is our targeted practical steps for our operations to reduce our carbon emissions. The next items on this are updating the city's green building design guidelines for private and for public buildings to include tree canopy requirements and biophilic design concepts. So that is one we have on the second half of this. I think we would need a consultant to help us with that, but that could follow from our community energy plan work as well. On stormwater, the council has asked us to take a look at Arlington County's regulations. They have put in place an option for homeowners to detain a 3-inch rainfall event on their property in lieu of complying with all of the phosphorus and Chesapeake Bay requirements. So it's an interesting option. Staff has evaluated it. I think council would like to report on that, but that's an important regulation that would affect every homeowner in the city. And so that policy question is one that we'll engage the Planning Commission on. I'll wrap up by noting we do have the transition zone as kind of the big zoning code change. The City Council has asked us to look at accessory dwelling units as a zoning code item. That is another one that would touch every property in the city. So we're kind of trying to assess. We have a lot of big plans that would be going through the process. And so we're kind of still engaged with the council as to whether that's formally going to be on the work plan in this 2-year cycle, and be interested in the Planning Commission's views on that. Arlington County is doing a lot in this space. They spend a ton of time on accessory units, as I think you all are aware. And they're also engaged in a really big effort on what they're calling the missing middle of changing single-family or detached zoning across the county. So we're watching that very closely to see what we learn from that. But that would also be tied into that accessory unit policy. Potential code changes there. So I'll stop there, and happy to discuss this, get your thoughts on it.
Thank you, Mr. Shields. Yeah, the council is certainly busy. Does anyone have any questions? I know this is, and for the commission's benefit, I think everyone recalls, this is something that I know Mr. Stoddard talked to us about as far as getting some input in this, so that, I think there had been some times over the years where we felt the council kind of came up with with the policy, or with a priority, that I should say, that was kind of something that the Planning Commission thought wanted to be involved in earlier in the process. And so I think this is an attempt to try to do that. And I think it's good. And I appreciate Mr. Shields coming here to do this, because this is something that I know we talked to Mr. Stoddard about, trying to improve that communication. So this is good. Does anyone have any comments or questions or specific things they want to bring up? Go ahead, Ms. Weiss.
I think this is a really helpful process, and it's helpful to see the work plan laid out in this way. I guess what I don't understand is, and there's a lot, there's a lot going on, and it's hard to prioritize, because we do have big ambitions and big plans and a limited amount of resources to go after them. I guess I'd be curious in understanding what makes it on and what makes it off, particularly in light of our comprehensive plan. Process is curious for me. I'm curious about that. And the thing that I keep coming back to and keeps not showing up is what we noted as a short-term plan in the environmental chapter of the comprehensive plan. I was just looking at the date we approved it, or was approved, February 2020, so just before the world changed and the before times. But we did note, we did adopt as a short-term strategy, developing a climate resilience plan. And certainly all the work that we're doing on stormwater is part of that. But the climate models, there's just been a report out that said all the climate models from the UN's IPCC are conservative. The effects that we're seeing right now, warming, drought, changes in precipitation, that's all at the upper end of what these models have expected, and that's in a 1.1 degree warmed world. And I think we've just seen from recent political events that it's going to be very hard for us to roll back emissions nationally. And I think we've been able to get away without having a deliberate climate resilience plan, because we haven't been hammered by anything really since the derecho and Sandy. But it's only a matter of time. And I just think it's a little short-sighted that nobody, we've said, we agreed as a city that we would look to climate resilience but we're not dedicating resources to it, and I don't see it anywhere on city council's work plan. And I know that staff is short-staffed, but I am concerned that we are opening ourselves up to the next major severe weather event without a real plan to deal with it, let alone chronic temperature rises, which we're all dealing with now as we lose tree cover in the city.
Thank you, Ms. Weiss. No, and we have talked about that, and I think that, you're right, it was right before, it was in the early 2020, but that doesn't change the importance. If anything, it's more important now than it was then. So it's something that I think, for the council to continue to think about. I mean, they have a long list of priorities, and they're all competing for limited staff time and resources, and that's always the challenge. But certainly, that was a strong recommendation that we made, and I think we've echoed it several times on various, I know in several retreats we've talked about it and other settings. So, okay. Any other commissioners have any other comments or things they wanted to ask about on the work plan? Go ahead, Mr. Stevens.
A couple of comments. Yeah, I would certainly support adding resilience, because basically what we have here is the mitigation, which of course is absolutely essential, but we need to focus on adaptation as well. So a couple things that I just want to mention. I mean, there's an awful lot here, and I think it's a really good work plan. So that's, I'd give it an A. Overall in terms of laying out a work plan. A couple things that I would like to see added under safe and complete streets, number 6, where it talks about installing new bike lane facilities. I guess in the past we used to have that as a goal to add 1 mile of protected lanes, and I realize that's kind of a heavy lift, but this kind of reduces it down to adding new bike lanes only whenever there's a street repaved. And it seems like we kind of went from one level, and took a big, step down to have just a very limited goal. And I know the CACT has kind of addressed this in some good detail. So I'm just wondering if we can't find something that's less than adding a full mile, which is a heavy lift, to something. I mean, just to get it started so that we begin the process of adding protected bike lanes in the city, even if it's just a very small section, but somehow to start that process so people could kind of see what a protected bike lane is, and to tee it up so that in future budgets we can begin to address that, like we do traffic calming and some other things that we've recently been very successful in getting into our budget process. I would support the effort to take a look at accessory dwelling units. We had a very excellent presentation from Mike Novotny, I think it was about a year ago, who kind of went through some of the iterations in Arlington. They started out with a plan to implement detached accessory dwelling units, and it didn't succeed, but they learned from that. And so through these successive plans, I think they've actually reached a point now where we could begin to take a look at where they're at right now and not have to go back and reinvent a lot of things ourselves. So I realize it's a heavy lift. There's going to be a lot of community discussion that's going to be needed to do that. But I think it's an important issue, and I see it happening in a lot of places around the country. So I think the time is right for us to start to look at that. So I think that's all I had. Otherwise, the biggest message I would share, though, is this is a really good plan, and I'm happy to see the council, kind of signing both themselves and us up for a very good list of activities.
Since Councilmember Hardy is here, she was a big advocate for having that clear standard of a mile of bike lanes per year, or something that's measurable, and. I kind of push back on that myself, because what we do follow is the bike master plan. So we don't just put bike facilities anywhere, we put them where the plan says they should go. Right. We also don't do them on old streets, because the paint will be gone in about 6 months. So we do it when we repave. And so because of those two things, it is a bit hard to say, well, we're going to do a mile each year because maybe the streets that most need to be repaved are not identified for segregated bike lanes or that type of facility in the bike master plan.
Yeah, I mean, actually, the bike master plan was done, I think, in 2015, and I think this concept of a protected bike lane has kind of come on more recently. So I know that one of the things that the Virginia Tech students are going to do is to focus on just that sort of an updated look, at what's needed. And I'm sure, we'll all look forward to what they have to say.
So one thing that did get added in there was where we have our existing bike lanes in the city, take a look at adding the actual physical barriers to them.
Right.
Which is not our design guideline right now. So that would be kind of something that we would look at and kind of as a pilot. There are kind of technical issues that you have to go through in terms of when you put all that kind of thing into the right of way.
Sure.
Both for, you just have to work through those issues.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Stevens. Let's see, anybody else? Come on, go ahead.
I'm also very excited about this work plan. There's so many good ideas in here. I want to do everything now, but I understand you have a small staff. I would support Ms. Weiss's recommendation to somehow add a climate resiliency plan in. I wonder if maybe some of what Mr. Stevens might be talking about too is this idea of tactical urbanism, which I think the CACT has been promoting. I know there have been a lot of discussions about that. So maybe, even if we can't add a 1 mile of bike lane necessarily, maybe there are other kinds of ways that we can make our streets more bikeable and walkable, and experimenting with those approaches I think is valuable. So I think there needs to be a discussion about how we want to approach those kinds of tactics. And I would also agree with Mr. Stevens. I would support looking at accessory dwelling units. I'm also closely following what Arlington's doing with their missing middle housing study. I hope that we can learn a lot from what they're going through now in their process. I think T-zones is a big part of that, which you all have listed here. I'd also kind of elevate parking requirements as an important issue for us to talk about, not even just on our public streets, but also in the buildings that we're approving. A lot of cities are moving to parking maximums instead of parking minimums. If you want to reduce the number of cars on the roads, reduce the possibility of injuries to pedestrians and cyclists, we really need to think about what we're doing with our built environment to encourage car use or other modes of transportation. So that is another element that I would emphasize. I'm really excited that the Virginia Tech students are going to be helping us with the bike master plan. I think the CACT has done a lot of really great work already, thinking through, some of their recommendations on this. They have a pretty lengthy document that they're going to be sharing with the students as background, which I hope will be helpful for them. Yeah, and I think that's it. All of these things to me are interrelated. We want to have, fewer cars on the street, better facilities for walking and biking, more trees and green. It's just it's a nicer place to live. So I hope that we can do what we can in these next 2 years to move towards that. Yeah, thank you. It looks like a great plan.
Thank you, Ms. Comont. Yeah, it certainly, I think you kind of hit the nail on the head. A lot of these things are interrelated. I mean, it's there are broad goals for the city, and a lot of these are hitting that from different angles. Everything from one of my pet peeves, the utility poles and sidewalks, which it's one of my biggest pet peeves living here. To more big picture things. So no, it's an ambitious set of policies, but that's what we need to do. I mean, we may not achieve all of them in 2 years, but you got to have that list so you can keep on working at it. I think it's certainly in line with a lot of our priorities, and we're happy to play our role in advancing these ideas. Okay, anybody else? Anything they wanted to add? If not, we'll, again, thank Mr. Shields a second time for being with us this evening. Again, appreciate you spending your evening with us. I know you're here late many nights of the week, and so we appreciate you doing another one with us. If there are no other questions for Mr. Shields, then we'll, I guess, move on. We had just, after that, we just had a few correspondence items, some of which were, well, Mr. Polinsky sent us a letter related to the Founders Row 2 site plan, and everyone can take a look at that. He provided some comments in regards to our work session on that item. We're going to see that again in the coming weeks. Mr. Rothstein, everyone I believe saw that, related to the item we dealt with earlier in the meeting. Ms. Councilwoman Hardy sent everyone a really interesting report that was produced by the McGuire Woods firm related to the history of zoning and equity and racial segregation here in Virginia. Very informative, very interesting. Encourage everyone to take a look at that. And last but not least, I think it was just alluded to, the Great Streets walking tour on Monday, August 1st. Hopefully the weather cools down by then, maybe just a smidge. And that sounds like a interesting thing to participate in. So that takes us to the end of our formal agenda. Somehow we had one action item and it took us 2 hours, but that's how we roll sometimes. And if there are no other items for the good of the cause that anyone wants to bring up, then
Can I make just a quick comment?
go for it.
It was really good news that the NVTA approved the $22 million grant application for North Washington Street. I hope that's something that will come to the Planning Commission to get some early input, because the plans were, I'll say, a little sketchy when they were submitted. So I think the concepts are all great and very much needed. Now I think it's time to get the detail in. So thought I'd share that. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Stevens. So if there's nothing else, we'll let Mr. Stevens have the last word, and we'll call this meeting adjourned as of 9:41.